of the wetlands buying up a property. She told me, and some people that were involved in the Parks District, not the Parks District, but the Gresham's Parks Bureau. It's not really a bureau, it's kind of just the people that work for the city and take care of the parks. They told me that Helen Shaw had arranged to transfer her land over when she passed away. The details were not very clear. But that was, that all happened in the 1990s. I met her in 2012, 2013, 14. Then I kind of lost track of her because she got kind of elderly, and I tried to visit her a few times, but it never really happened. Her neighbors or her relatives actually chased me off the property a few times. There were some issues with homeless people trying to break into her farm, and they probably thought anybody who came to see the property was after her stuff or her or something. But she passed away in 2019, early in 2019. And I never really knew anything about it until a little bit later. The city told me that they were in discussions and thinking about buying this land. And I thought, well, that's great. That was what was supposed to happen anyway. A little bit later, actually in early 2020, the neighborhood association got a notice that a developer was optioning that land and was looking into the permitting process. And that was a big shock, because all this time we'd been told by the city and by Metro that this was a key parcel and it would be included in the wetlands when Helen passed away. But now things have taken a real turn, and a developer has had hold of it. And just to describe the property a little bit more, about a third of it is wetlands and low-lying meadows that get flooded quite frequently. And a little more than a third, almost half of it is forested. And there's also a house and some outbuildings, and there's forest around those. So well over half of it has significant trees on it. Jim, I think we learned that it had over 300 trees. Do you know roughly the exact number?
I think it's around, in terms of mature regulated trees. So those are ones that are over 8 inches in diameter. There's over 350 of those.
Yeah. So you have to look at this from the perspective of a guy, or not a guy, but several generations of agricultural people that probably logged off the original old growth forest way around the turn of the century or something, and then replanted it. And I would say that the forest that's there now was purposefully planted as a Douglas fir forest to be a woodlot that could be harvested when the trees were mature.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
Would you mind if I'm going to have Janet screen share and just pull up a map for a minute so that we have a visual. So
I need permission.
Yes, you have my permission.
Okay.
Let's see. You got it.
Knock it up.
And then I guess you can just keep talking over that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all
right.
There we go. You probably can't see my mouse move around on that, but the light green or bluish area there that has a finger on it now, that is Helen Shaw's property on it's just north of Powell Boulevard, 8 acres approximately. And the land to the north of that says TLDR, that is Southwest Community Park. That's the land that City of Gresham bought from Dr. Shaw when he passed away and his estate sold the land for a park. So the green area, the part that's closest to the subdivision that's on the left, that's all going to be turned into 30 units of housing if the developer gets his way. And that will remove approximately 260 trees that are in that area. Those trees that are being removed, as Jim said, are all mature trees over 8 inches in diameter. I'd say they're well over 8 inches in diameter. These trees are really big. And the unique thing about them is they're not manicured in any way. They're not topped. They're not trimmed up. I don't think anybody's gone in there to thin that forest. So it's an enormous number of closely packed trees. Our idea was this whole area should have been kept as a park. The trees would have been remaining as they stood, maybe thinned out a little bit in order to encourage proper growth and maturation. And then the part of the land that was closest to Powell could be lightly developed as a parking area, an entrance to the park and a parking area, and amenities like a restroom or a roof structure for events, but nothing major, nothing like tennis courts and soccer fields, baseball things. It's all the neighbors around there, they all want to keep the natural area. I think the city of Gresham and Metro and any government entity would like to retain this natural area because it's so unique. It's a habitat for so many different kinds of species because it's such a diverse habitat. It's a forest that's connected to a wetland, that's connected to sloped butte, volcanic butte. I'll stop talking and see if anybody has anything they want to find out about this. And I'll add a few more things after that. If there is a picture that Janet, you have that would show like a satellite overhead view, that might be helpful too.
Yeah, I was going to do that. Let me see here. Okay.
I have some other pictures myself, but I know when I try to screen share, my computer crashes and then you never see me again.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've got one I can pull up if you want.
Yeah, for those who haven't been on the site, just to the right of the green area is the Fairview Creek headwaters. And so that development, the cul-de-sac with the 33 lots would be just adjacent to the wetlands. And right now there's really no trees separating the wetlands from what would be that housing development. The trees are more toward the left and the back of that. Well, more to the left and back of the property, but quite a few on the left side of that. More from about a third of the way back in, John, they start?
That's a good assumption, a quarter to a third of the way back.
Yeah.
Yep. I think if you see a satellite picture, it would be
So
easy.
the only trees being kept would be those sort of on the upper right-hand side of the green as a little bit of a buffer. I think they're leaving 67 or so trees out of the 350 mature trees.
Yeah, that's a good picture.
Great, Janet. Thank you.
Zoom in a little bit and you'll get a good idea what's going on. That's perfect right there.
It's this actually right here.
Yeah, there it is there. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can see the other concern for us, in Gresham is that you can see how devoid that neighborhood, the Centennial neighborhood, is of trees. I mean, this is actually one of the last dense forested stands on private land in the city. And it's in a neighborhood that actually is very deficient in terms of tree canopy already.
Yeah, just north of this area, if you zoom out one or two clicks, right about there. Okay, so you see that if you look to the south, that's Johnson Creek kind of meandering from east to west, and there are some trees because that's where on the south side of Johnson Creek, that's where the buttes begin. That's where the rolling hills and buttes that go all the way into the Clackamas River watershed start. But as you go north of Powell, you can clearly see that you've entered the urban area very, very much so. One thing that I should point out here, and that's a perfect image, if you leave it right there, the large green area in the middle, that is Grant Butte. That's a hillside. It cannot be developed. And it's treed, but it actually burned off. And it's not a good habitat for coniferous trees. There's deciduous trees mainly on there. The area just to the north of that is Division Street. And then to the north of that is, you see a huge open area. That's actually a 200-foot deep gravel quarry. It's tapped out. It is the beginning of the Rockwood industrial area, which is a whole other chapter for us. We're, if you're in the city of Gresham, you may or may not know, but we're actively trying to pursue getting that industrial area turned into something other than an industrial area, because right now it's zoned heavy industrial. All of that looks like it's ponds and empty land, those are all gravel quarries that are tapped out and being filled in. So you have to understand that to the north of the wetlands, which, as I said, are from Division Street south to Powell Boulevard, everything to the north of Division Street is industrial land. If you go to the south of Powell Boulevard, you see kind of an open brown area. That area, I see a cursor moving around. That's not the cursor that's not the area I'm talking about, but that squared off section just to the lower right of the Shaw property there, right there.
Right next to Hollybrook.
Yeah, that area is, you guessed it, another industrial area. That is all owned by PGE and Pacific Power and Light. They have substations there, and they own a lot of the land there, but they haven't developed it yet. But it's zoned industrial. So what people in Gresham don't yet know, and I'm telling you now for the first time, you probably now are knowing this, the Shaw property and Grant Butte wetlands are bookended north and south by industrial land. They're bookended east and west by dense suburban housing.
I think an interesting note about Grant Butte, unlike the boring buttes, like Mount Tabor and those that are around Gresham, Hogan Butte, Gresham Butte, et cetera, they're all volcanic. My understanding is that Grant Butte is actually a composite material from the Brett's floods rather than volcanic. That's what I was told, that it was unique as a butte in that it's not volcanic. It was due to the, huge, tremendously huge floods that went down the Columbia River, 12 to 18,000 years ago.
I would say it might be volcanic in origin underneath all of the, I would say, I'll call them pebbles, but they're the size of houses some places. It's all riprap that came flooding down from the Missoula area. Missoula flood came down the Columbia River basin and washed up that far. Yeah. So if you look at the dirt there, it's made up of rounded river rock that rolled up that hill during a huge flood event.
Yeah, some of those, the Missoula floods and Brett's floods are the same, but yeah, some of those rocks are Montana rocks.
Yeah, they came a long way. But to dial it back into the Shaw property, yeah, that is, you can clearly see that everything north of Powell is housing, except for the forest on the Shaw property, which extends a little bit into the southwest park area. Half of that triangle of forest is Shaw's forest, half of it is the Southwest Community Park. And then north of that, you've got Grant Butte. But everything else there, you're done. There's no more forest land. So once that's gone, it's really gone. And there's
John,
no
isn't the boundary close to where that little division is in the forest? It's just a little bit, the Shaw property, the boundary is just south of that sort of little clearing in there.
Right. You're looking at a triangle with a point headed down.
Yeah.
And if you go up the left side of the triangle, about 2/3 of the way up, in the forested part, down a little bit further.
Right there.
Yeah, right there. That is actually a open field that was cut out of the forest by Dr. Shaw. He raised bulls for breeding dairy and beef cattle in the area. And he had a bullpen in that area. So that's a huge, well, if you're standing in it, it's quite large. It's a field in there. And everything south of that field is the Shaw farm that will be developed.
So John, I'm wondering if we can maybe do a little description of like who the different players are politically. I mean, the story of how this opportunity was missed a year ago is probably worth sharing, but I've now researched enough that I see that, Metro sort of didn't seem interested. because, you know, oh, this isn't exactly perfect for our, you know, in our world. And then there's Gresham, you know, not having the money or not having the political will or having their own problems, COVID, wildfires, whatever. But like, I wonder if it makes sense to talk about sort of who some of the current players are and maybe what, you know, we can do politically, and what, you know, where we are right now. And thanks
Great.
for taking notes, Janet, if that's what you're doing.
So this property, as I mentioned earlier, was offered to the city of Gresham and to Metro by Helen Schall's will. And as you alluded, Metro wasn't really interested in it because they're more interested in green space. This would obviously be green space, but the city of Gresham would like to have made it into a community park. As part of that community park, of course, they would have kept the forest, but I think Metro wanted Gresham to take the lead on this and maintain it and do the majority of the purchasing of it. However, Gresham's budget is zero. They're actually 13 million in the hole because of some budgeting finagling that didn't quite work out right. To top that all off, though, if you are familiar with the Metro bonding measures, you know that in 1996 and 2006, and most recently in 2019, Metro puts out and renews a Parks and Nature Area bond. It's a ton of money, and whenever they put it up for renewal, it always gets renewed, or it has so far. But this property came up for sale or it was made, Metro and City of Gresham were made aware that, hey, you have a chance to get this by the estate. And that was in August of 2019. Of course, the bond measure was coming up for an election in November. So the Metro and Gresham story is, hey, you know, we were hoping to get the money, but we didn't have it at the time. And even if the measure passed, it would take a long time for the people of Gresham and the city and Metro to come to terms with, should we buy it or not? So their story is, oh, we just kind of couldn't do it at the time, so we had to pass on that one. But then the tragedy is, when I researched this a little bit more, what did they actually pass on? It wasn't very clear, because they never told us that Helen Schall had offered a 10% discount on the appraised value. The problem is, not only did they lose that 10% discount, they didn't even get an appraisal. And the appraisal would have been on the estate's dime. The estate would have to get the appraisal. And I've asked them again and again and again, well, what's the story? Did you see an appraisal? And I just get stonewalled on this. They never really saw an appraisal. What they did see, and what you would all have seen if you looked at this property and researched it yourself, you would have seen the property is valued at over $6 million. It's valued as developable multifamily land by the city of Gresham, and the county assessor puts a real market value on that 7.88 acres of $6.3 million. But the problem is, the Multnomah County assessor doesn't look at it closely and say, hey, wait a minute, half of it's underwater. You can't develop it at that capacity at all. So I called the assessor and I told him, you know, this isn't Florida. You can't sell swampland to people like that. They looked at it themselves and they said, yeah, John, you're right. It's really only worth $2 million, not $6.3 million. But we can't change it until November, when we do the annual assessment adjustments. You know, it's a moot point, because I found out about that after not even knowing that Gresham had kind of blown its chance at the discounted deal anyway. Later, I found out that an appraisal had been made. An appraisal came in at $1 million for that property. So even Metro's reduced price was more than double what the actual appraised value of the property was. So when you look at all those things taken into conjunction, you realize Metro and Gresham could have gotten that property for $900,000 in August of 2019. They didn't.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't understand. And I've tried to talk to these people in Metro and City of Gresham and figure out what's going on with that. I'm not getting any clear answers. I'm waiting for clear answers.
Mm.
But I do know that in 2020, in March, that developer started the application process. And that's when I started to find out, well, what's going on? And that's when I was told, well after the fact, that, you know, we kind of had an opportunity and we were waiting for an appraisal and we don't know what happened. But now it looks like the owner wants to develop the property. And I think the message that I was getting from people in Metro and the City of Gresham were really confused. I think the people that were doing the negotiating and the people that were talking to me were not talking to each other. And they just couldn't get their act together on this at all.
Something that happened recently was the Planning Commission did meet and discuss the application by the developer. And I'm sadly to say I have not read the 24-page document that they did send me. But then there's an opportunity to appeal for 12 days. So, you know, that's something that you and I have been pushing back and forth about. And you know, right at the moment, it seems like there's more interest and eyes on this than maybe there was a little while ago. I think partly due to the articles in the paper. So I'm wondering if there's a way, well, there's a few thoughts that come to mind. One is, I wonder if there's a way that we can capitalize on that to possibly get somebody to make an appeal on some grounds. I don't know what grounds. But then also, you know, a couple of us have been reaching out to organizations like Trust for Public Land, Audubon, 1,000 Friends of Oregon. You know, so far nothing, no stones that have been overturned with $1 million or whatever it's going to take to, you know, potentially buy this. But I think, you know, just the efforts that we've done in the last couple of days have led to some conversations and, you know, maybe just some, well, some conversations with Metro councilors. You know, this is now on the radar of Lynn Peterson, the head of Metro. This is now on the radar of, you know, Multnomah County councilors as well. And so, you know, I'm not saying that the end result is going to be anything particular, but I do think that there's more political momentum and energy looking at this than there has been in a while. So just as, you know, I just want to put in a point of positivity, like in a point of like, hey, maybe there is something that maybe we can pull a rabbit out of the hat, you know, and maybe we can't, but you know, there's certainly more people looking at this now than at least, you know, I mean, I wasn't aware of it a week ago. And all of a sudden the 400 people or something in our group are aware of it, you know, and a few other organizations that maybe weren't aware of it before. I did mention it to Friends of the Columbia Slough, and, you know, it's on their radar, as it should be. Audubon Society certainly knows about it. So I'm wondering if, like, you know, now that we know some of what's happened and some of the history with this, and now we've also gotten a chance to meet each other, you know, a little bit more in person. If Janet's doing some great job there taking notes. Yeah, I'm curious if anybody, you know, John's done a lot of talking. I've done a bunch of talking. James has done a bunch of talking. Does anybody have any thoughts that come to them in terms of maybe strategies we might employ or things that are left out that you're curious about? Yeah.
Hi. I don't know that much about Gresham, but you know, a couple of initial questions that come to mind are, you know, looking at this satellite view, it appears relatively densely occupied by stuff already. Is there other developable land within the city as an alternative to this space already? And is there what are the stressors right now to continue to find developable land in Gresham
Developable for
for
housing.
housing?
Yeah, there are other large parcels. The stressors would be how much are those other large parcels? I think any developer, and especially this developer, is always looking for large parcels and planning ahead and planning ahead and planning ahead. So he may already be thinking in terms of, I'll get this parcel and I'll develop it and I'll make a profit on it. My business will keep going. Or I've already bought it. I paid my $1 million. I'll sell it to the city of Gresham, to Metro, make a profit again, and turn around and develop some other place. He's done that before.
So he might be taking advantage of the fact that Gresham missed the opportunity when it struck.
Might be.
I did suggest to one of the city councilors, though, that they at least consider trading this for another parcel of city property. I mean, there's one where the city hall used to be that's been torn down and the land is now vacant on Powell Boulevard, right in historic part of downtown. It's not nearly, that large in terms of acreage, but it still would be ideal site for multifamily housing, for example. So I don't know if anyone in the city is actively exploring that kind of trade, but I think with a developer, he ought to be, to me, it could be tantalizing.
Yeah, and Jim, I've brought that up, but also the same piece of property. It's zoned for higher density, so this developer does develop apartment complexes as well. So he could put in, I don't know how many units of apartment housing right there in downtown Gresham. That would be a worthwhile swap. Dollar for dollar, acre for acre, it wouldn't, but dollar for dollar, it may be. Just to clue you in, so you know how I feel about this. Everything that you see, Janet, if you could not zoom in, but move the map so that you can see the north part of that Division Street, if you can encapsulate Division Street there. There, right there. Okay, so if you look at the, not all that far, just from Powell to Division Street, if you can grab that. Pull your map up a little bit. There you go. If you look from Division Street going south, about halfway down Grant Butte, that is the Gantenbein Dairy. That was a dairy farmer who passed away and his kids didn't know what to do with the land. So they looked for somebody to buy it. Audubon, Nature Trust, other groups were trying to cobble together an offer. They did get an offer on the table, but a few days before they were able to put it in front of the Gantenbein family, the same developer that's working on the Shaw, that owns the Shaw property now, he bought the Gantenbein place for $1 million.
John,
That was in 2011.
where is this that you're talking about?
It's
Up
from
north?
Division Street right to there. Division
Okay.
Street south to right there. All of that field area
Over
and
here?
that half of the hillside.
So this part here?
Correct.
Okay.
The same developer, his name is Chet Antonson, came up with a proposal to put in 200 or 300 apartments and a strip mall on Division Street on that piece of land. So Metro and East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District and the city of Gresham got together and said, after we urged them, let's buy this from the developer. How much should we pay? $2.2 million. So that developer sold his $1 million property for parkland for $2.2 million. So you sort of see the picture
Right.
in his MO. And it's just, to me, it's insane. It's a breach of fiduciary trust. It's so sad to see this happen. one time, but to see it happen again, a second time.
Well, John, maybe that's the story. Maybe that's the story that needs to get back to the reporters at Pamplin or whoever is going to do the next story on this. That we've got a developer who's, using the system he's gaming the system. We just had a president who did that for 4 years, and now we're seeing it in in our neighborhood.
Well,
there's something there. Anyway, thank you for sharing that.
yeah, it's a real tragedy, and it's certainly something there. It's something that I've seen, and you're probably saying to yourselves right now, well, why hasn't John brought this up before? And believe me, there have been machinations going on behind the scenes trying to get people to figure this out, and people just haven't been figuring this out. COVID's played a big role in it. The city of Gresham's gone through some dramatic political changes and internal management changes at the same time that this is all going on. Metro, as I mentioned, they've got their bond measure up and running, but they are so, I wouldn't say lethargic, but their process in order to figure out which properties to purchase takes a lot of background checking and consensus building, and a lot of backroom negotiating that just we as the public cannot be part of unless it's you attending some prearranged public town hall kind of thing about a property that they're working on, and then you go to that and everything's kind of, it seems like it's been decided anyway. You're just gonna check a few boxes. Do you want red benches or blue benches? Do you want a dog off-leash dog area or what? Yeah, I'm being a little bit cynical here, but I think you get the picture.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of stuff going on in the background. I do think that the public will eventually need to know about this. We'll need to be talking to the people in the city and asking them. We've already asked them some hard questions. People in Metro and people in the city, what's going on here? Why did this get to this position? We really haven't gotten all the answers. Jim, you really haven't heard any answers yet, have you?
No, not really. And I think we're hearing from Metro and even from East Multnomah Soil Water Conservation District that there's interest in helping secure this, and they want Gresham to, take the lead. Metro seems to be right now saying that the wetlands are, at least in their estimation, protected. So they seem less interested in this particular parcel than we heard earlier. But I think East Multnomah Soil Water Conservation, a letter I received this week from one of their directors, said they're interested in looking at this and hoping it can be acquired. But again, they're taking a back seat to Gresham right now. So I think it's going to take stronger political lobbying efforts to get the parties seriously moving before the developer can take further action, because the hearings officer report, I think it's going to be difficult to challenge, to be honest, to have an appeal, because he did look at all of the arguments from a variety of folks and still gave the go-ahead with just two exceptions. One dealt with this being a clear cut, so he did find that, but essentially it doesn't mean much at all. But the only holdup is that the developer was asked to conduct another wind throw assessment, this time wind throw from the south rather than just from the east. So other than that, it looks like he's giving the green light for this development.
Yeah, it does look like that he has the go ahead, and now it's up to some serious talk with people who have the funding to try to buy him out. So one of the constraints to buying him out, as Jim alluded to, is the forest is the area that we're concerned about now. The wetlands are a highly sensitive habitat area that cannot be developed. So that area that looks like a wetland, that will not be built on. It's just the forested area. The forest will be cut down for the housing. So 3 acres of this, which are wetland, are already preserved, whether it's sold privately or kept as a park or whatever happens to it. It's just the forest land. I think the trick is to try to get Metro, City of Gresham, East Multnomah Soil and Water, anybody who has the funding available to understand that this forest is worth preserving. 4 acres of forest.
Okay. I think we are probably all in agreement with that. And I think that, you know, the way my mind works when it's working is, you know, to try to figure out how to start, if not continue, to apply pressure where it might do some good. And so you just brought up the organizations that seem to be the ones that need reminding that they work for us and that, you know, people really care about this forest. So I don't know that there's much more like background information that we need to discuss, although it probably could go on for hours in a way.
Yeah, I'll just say also one other thing, just to kind of put this into perspective a little bit more. The area that is currently under discussion is going to be developed, if it goes that route, into 30 units of housing, individual lots, very small lots with full-size houses on them, though, you know, not huge houses. That's for $1 million investment. The area to the north, the Gantenbein property, that was several blocks of apartments, a strip mall, gas station, stores, stuff like that. A much heavier, more costly development. And that, you know, in negotiations that you and I, none of us were privy to really, that $1 million was leveraged into over a $2 million price point. The developer said, hey, I can sell this easily and let somebody else develop it for $4.5 million. I think that property had a higher price tag than the Shaw property has. That's my conclusion, though. I could be wrong. I mean, the developer has everybody over a barrel in a way. But I mean, if you really parse it out and say, okay, how much money do you have invested in it? How much money could you potentially make in it? You know, if we have other things on the table, like the old City Hall property, we throw that in, whatever. I think that it wouldn't be quite as much of a hit as the Gantenbein property was back in 2014. But the more you put pressure on the entities that have the money, the more money that they may be able to put on the table in order to pay off this developer. I don't know if that sort of makes sense to you or not. It's been a real struggle for me. I mean, I saw this $900,000 deal that could still have been worked on, but the city and Metro and just kind of never really got their act together to do it. Maybe it still can happen. I don't know. I mean, there's a legal precedent to claw back a deal because the will was misinterpreted. That's another thing. Does anybody have a good probate lawyer they can bring on pro bono? Yeah, I mean, Albert, I'll let you go ahead. I'll just leave you with those thoughts.
Well, I've done a lot of talking. Does anybody else have any words to add in at this point?
I'd like to jump in. You had a pretty good segue there for applying pressure. And there were some great volunteers who went out to the property today and scouted it. Oh, good. Luna is here. And they scouted it with a map and looked at it for direct actions. Luna, maybe you should describe some of the tactics that could be possible that could buy us some time. Go ahead.
Yeah. We like walked around the property and looked at the trees, and I'm not the expert here. I was just kind of there to help out, but some of the people who were the experts there were saying like, while the trees are like very tall or like tallish without horizontal branches or stuff like that, it would be possible to like set up tree sets or lines between the trees or stuff like that. And that probably things like barricades or stuff like that wouldn't work, but it would be very feasible to be in the trees.
Yeah, I think that might be a very newsworthy event. It certainly would raise awareness to what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. We don't know the time frame, though. I think that's one thing that we're kind of missing. And John, somewhere in all the chats that we're going by today, you mentioned a 2-month period. Did I hear that right?
Well, the permitting process, in order to get the go ahead to start clear cutting, the clear cutting would probably be done in stages. I'm not really certain how that would happen, but I think the developer still has to get the authorization to say where he's going to put his streets, how he's going to do it, how he's going to put in environmental containment devices to keep the runoff from going into the wetlands while he's doing the construction, doing the tree cutting. All that has to be methodically planned out and permitted. And that process from today would probably take about 2 months before the first tree could be cut. Now, I'm not an expert on this, so I can't really say for certain.
One other element is the hearings officer, I think, looked at testimony on the geology report, and given how close this is to the wetland, any kind of soil movement, grading, would have to occur between the months of June and September. So at least they can cut the trees probably before then, but the grading work has to be done during those dry summer months.
I have a question. So it's private property. It's owned now by this developer. There's fencing, I guess, on one side of it, but is there fencing all the way around it? Looney, you want to jump in on that?
The area between the north boundary of the park and the Shaw property, it does have a fence on it. The other area, the area between that subdivision, probably has fences. Somebody put up a wooden fence in front of their own little housing section between the forest and their home. The area between the wetland and the Shaw property, that eastern boundary, has sort of a broken down 3-strand barbed wire fence that's remnant of the days of when it was cattle processing. Not processing, but they operated fields for cows there.
Yeah, a reason that I ask is that from my small experience of trying to preserve trees, if you get people to the trees, and especially kids, take pictures of them, make signs, hang them on the trees, have a potluck by the trees, all that kind of thing, really is very newsworthy. And this could be a way to get a little bit more attention on this park, expand the Southwest Park, as I like to call it. And so that also might be something that we consider doing in the next period of time, is maybe have an in-person powwow over there on the right side of the arrowhead of this park. And there's a lot of different things going through my mind right now about actions that we can take. But I do think for me personally, I'm going to go and take a look at this property for one thing. And it seems like we've got a little bit of time. I also want to propose that kind of in the next period, just thinking about what's happening around us right now. COVID cases are going down, spring is coming. And so people are going to want to get out of their houses and be milling about. And I know I am. And so, this could be a potential place for people to be invited to mill and to take some pictures and to get acquainted with this issue. And that also might be the time to blanket that nearby neighborhood with some flyers that say, so like the trees, want to keep them standing? Here's your mayor's phone number and email address for starters. Anyway, those are just some random thoughts, but I'm excited that of what we've done tonight and for the information that everyone has shared.
Me too. Can I just jump in for one second? So when I was looking at it today, it does have quite a lot of bramble under the trees. And I'm not well versed enough environmentally to know what could be done about that. The brambles are not native, as I understand it, and it could be that we ultimately might have to cut them out. I'm not sure. Whoops, where did John go? So I hope you are not disappointed. And Luna, did anybody else go scouting today? Give us your impressions.
Yeah, Derek, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to quickly jump in because while I wasn't there today on the scout, I did want to kind of like make sure that Luna and whoever else, maybe Matt or I think some other folks who might have been more involved in the scout and some potential direct action tactics. I want to just make sure that like they leave or I leave and can kind of like kind of communicate to that end of things, just sort of timeline if we know it, because there was a sense today, like part of the reason that I'm here and like perhaps Luna's here and the folks kind of from our contingent, whatever you want to call it, is we were under the impression that the cutting was going to happen today, and it sounds like it's not going to happen today. And I think we're just trying to like, for those of you who don't know much about tree sitting or do, you know, obviously it requires some like planning and resources. And so I guess I just want to be able to like convey to that group of people who might be thinking about doing that, just like any sort of sense of like when that might need to sort of start being organized. If it's like, so if it's 2 months away, that's a different conversation than if it's like happening tomorrow. And I'm still unclear kind of like what's going on.
Yeah, well, you know, in the last week, a lot of stuff has been coming forward. I don't think, my sense is that clear cutting is not happening tomorrow, and that it's probably quite a ways off, you know. But that said, I mean, when things happen, you know, oftentimes they happen quickly. Like, I mean, I've been caught blind in my own neighborhood with some really big trees that were all of a sudden chopped down, you know, while I was sleeping, kind of thing. And so, you know, it's definitely good to be paying attention. That said, my sense is that that the clear cutting is not happening, you know, imminently.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I was the one putting it out there, but that was how I understood it. My impression was that the developer was in a way jumping the gun before the appeals process that is supposed to take place on, let me see. It was 10 days from, but I'm not sure starting when. We probably have around 8 days left or something like that. And my impression was that the developer was so confident that they were going to start already.
Oh,
So sorry about that. So
no,
we'll try to sort out the misinformation.
Well, John, it's probably better to be more cautious than less because, like I said, I mean, things can happen quickly. The sad thing to me is, you know, given the fact that we just had all these wildfires in this past season, you know, the next thing up, well, why don't we do some clear cutting? I mean, are there not enough problems and disasters going on right now?
Hey, so just so we don't lose this thread quickly,
Yeah.
I think because these things do happen really quickly, and like I'm sure you know, there is some opportunistic sort of endeavoring that might happen on the part of the developer, you know, who's waiting for us to, you know, be asleep at the wheel. I think it'd be good to just make sure, you know, that we're all organizing in parallel. So I actually have to run, but it'd be great for those of you who aren't on like the Signal thread that kind of the group that I'm from is using. So, and for those of you who don't know, Signal is like a new encrypted app that a lot of us are using. It's very easy to download. Maybe we can like exchange some numbers, and I'd be happy to. I just think we should have a liaison between the two groups and get as many of you all on Signal. It's like pretty easy to use, And that way, if you know, especially for those of you who live in Gresham and like are there, it'll just help ensure that, you know, we're communicating, you know, clearly. And then and again, for the people who might be thinking of sitting or like blockading or whatever it is, that they know if, you know, something's happening as soon as possible. So
that sounds great. Derek, why don't you just stay on for a minute and people can text you their phone numbers if they want to participate. I'm on Signal.
okay. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Why don't we, I have to run, so I'm just going to put my number in the chat, and if everyone wants to send me a text, and then I can try to add those numbers to our Signal thread if everyone's okay with that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, and I think maybe Matt, I don't know, you're from Sunrise. I think that's an awesome like connection. Speaking from someone with like media connections too, I just think that like maybe we should let Matt say a couple words about, you know, what they can offer. They have like a huge national profile, and I think that would be just like really great to kind of hear what Matt has to say on that front.
Yeah, I was on the topic of liaison. Well, yeah. So I only learned, I guess, I was aware of this. I was only like more learned about this today. So I'm still getting up to speed. But I think Sunrise PX, at least I haven't had much discussion with other members, but we are happy to support and use our platform. I think we have like a few thousand social media followers, our like name recognition, stuff like that. And also like our, I guess, people power in a sense amount of members we have in Sunrise PDX to support this. And I think that's our main role here, is offering support with what we have. And I was going to ask on the topic of liaisoning, what's the best way for, I guess, us at Sunrise PX to be aware of like asks or support we can offer. I am in the Signal chat. We could do it through there. We could do it another method as well.
Well, Matt, I think there's a number of different organizations that are here, and then there's a number of different people. One of the groups that kind of got alerted to this is called We Keep Trees Standing. It's really a Portland-based group, but there's people in there who are all over the country. But it's mostly Portland-based. But then Portland, you know, is a big place. So I would say definitely hang in there. I think, you know, getting in touch with John of the Wetlands Group. James seems to have a clue about a few things, Janet as well. And if you want to put your contact information, maybe that would be a good idea. But I think, you know, I think we're just getting started here. I mean, some of you have been at this for a really long time, but hopefully you feel like the cavalry is on its way, and maybe we can have a good effect here.
In terms, just quickly, in terms of the tree cutting, given even the hearings officers' comments, the developer, since he is saving 67 large trees, they will have to be protected. So I think we should look for signs of when does the protection go up on the trees that they're trying to save, because then we will know they're going to be bringing in equipment very quickly and starting on the cutting. So we should at least look for those early indications. And I think the city, given the sensitivity of this, will really want to be ensuring that their codes, their code provisions are being adhered to in this.
Okay, well, it's been good to be together. I think we probably could hang out for a few more hours. I've just had my first guest come and visit me in 3 months, and she made me dinner, so I really want to eat it and see her. So there's that pressure on my time, but I would suggest that we reconvene probably in a couple of weeks, maybe less, depending on what happens. And in the meantime, I recommend just everybody who can get a chance to go out and see this place, take some pictures, send them to local media, write to the mayor of Gresham, keep pestering Metro, keep pestering the Multnomah County people, and let's just keep the popcorn popping and see if we can have some impact on this.
I'll-
Does
let
that
me
sound
just-
good?
I'll add one thing for people that do want to go visit the site. One of the things that's very confusing when you're going to visit is if you try to drive up on Powell, you'll find the driveway to the Shaw property now has a no trespassing sign on it. That's at the far west tip of the triangle down by Powell. Correct, right
Okay.
there. So you could go in that way, but you were trespassing. You really can't walk across the wetlands that easily because it's all wet. You can't come in from the wet because you drown in the swamps. They'd never find you. There is an entrance to Southwest Community Park. It's on Southwest 5th Drive. That arrow, that street right there where that arrow ends up. It just dead ends into the park, and there's a like a barrier so you can't drive into the park. There's no parking lot. There's people there that wonder what the hell you're parking there for, but that's how you get into the park. There's no real signage to say it's a park. But if you do want to go check out the whole place, that's a good place to enter the area. You can park your car someplace there just on the on-street parking and walking.
I noticed that this is a kind of a way to get in, and I see a path. Have you ever checked that out, John?
Yeah, there is another entrance up where it says Southwest 2nd, more to the left, left, right about there, right there. Oh, you just passed it. So I wouldn't recommend, you could get in there. There is an easement on that street, kind of right in the middle of that upper edge of that triangle. But the best place is 5th Drive. You can get to it from 182nd Avenue. That's the main north-south street there. You can also get to it from Powell Boulevard to 5th Drive, but you have to squirrel your way around it, that maze of subdivision, development that's already there, a bunch of cul-de-sacs and dead end streets. So if you have, I mean, people have asked me, how do you get into this park? And then I try to describe this on text messages and stuff, and it's not easy. That's the one big problem. The city of Gresham will tell you, oh, this park is bordered by the Gresham Fairview Trail and Powell Boulevard, so it's so accessible. It's not. You only can get in from the Shaw property. And if it's developed with housing, then you'd be able to drive in that long dead end street where there's 30 houses, but there's going to be no place to park on that street because their houses are so close together. And all the owners of those new homes will be parking their cars out in the front just to keep you out because they don't want you in there on their street parking. Let's park a boat and a trailer in front of their house. Okay, and that's my rant on that one. You can text me or email me if you have questions about how to get into the park. If you want to meet me in the park, I'd be happy to. If I've got time, I'd be more than happy to take you on a grand tour of the place.
Yeah, that sounds like maybe on the next sunny day, we take a little meander. And maybe Janet, if you're willing to maybe take some direction from John about just pointing out some of the places where there are entrances and what the issues are, that would be useful. Okay, cool. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's been a real pleasure. I so appreciate everybody and all of your energy. Matt, it was great to have you here. Look forward to hearing how Sunrise might like to get involved. And
yes, thanks everybody.
Yeah, let's keep it going.
Thank you, Albert.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for doing this.
You are welcome. Give us something to do during these times.